Is defiance good? Welcome to Law and Society. Please subscribe and let's dive into this. As I was thinking yesterday, as you've noticed that I've been gone, or maybe not. I went on a drive to the countryside to see a development project that my father's working on. So I had some time to think about, and we were discussing what's happening in America, and I thought about it, and I came back and I asked myself, why am I doing this? Why am I here when there are so many other people who are recording for history what is happening? Well, what I am doing, I think, is an ethnography. It's a personal perspective of an American citizen who happens to be living abroad through not completely his own full will, although not unwillingly either, and watching my country being destroyed from within. So I was working on my art and I was working on my writing projects. I started this thing called the Tribute Projects in 2011, and I've been sort of at it in different phases for the last 12 years. And no, more than 12 years, 14 years. So this Law and Society video, all of this is a sort of an extension of that project that I took on to sort of push back against this tide of hatred that I was watching bubble up in the United States around 2010, 2011, about what changes, what still hasn't changed, what needs to be changed. It was a sort of a very abstract idea, and it is congealed now into me talking about current events because this is a big part of how I protest. I'm limited in my means to protest in many other ways, but to build these stories to inform you is my protest, is my defiance. I have been on YouTube for over 4 years talking about the state of the world and then slowly tapering down to American current events and how that reflects on us legally and societally. Because I believe that law and society are the two pillars that hold this gate of democracy, because it without society, law has no operation. Without law and order, society breaks down. Now, so speaking of order, there's this defiance on Donald Trump's part where his life is about defiance. It's about defying order. He thrives on chaos. He defied the military by dodging the draft. He defied how businesses are run by bankrupting himself 6 times. He has defied the rule of law in front of us over the last 10 years. I don't know how many times. He has been held liable for it in civil court and in criminal court. But he defies it. His existence is a defiance of everything that society is. And therefore it is also a defiance of law. So the gateway of democracy is definitely at risk of shutting down and breaking apart because Donald Trump's chaos has manifested now in the real world and it is upending lives and traumatizing entire communities at a time. Concentration camps are actually now happening at Sikha, by extension to another dictator. And now that dictator is talking about sending Venezuelans back to Venezuela. Well, what about somebody like Andre Romero, who fled Venezuela because he dissented against the government? A gay makeup artist who has never committed a crime. What about Merwel Gutierrez, who is like 19 or something, and doesn't have a criminal record? What about Abrego Garcia, who does not have a criminal record and has a protected status given by an immigration judge in the United States? What the other side is doing is throwing more chaos, conflating the case of Abrego Garcia with the case of Laken Riley, wherein a criminal who entered the United States illegally raped and murdered this woman, this girl, he's being held accountable. Ironically enough, he's getting due process of law. That Abrego Garcia, who doesn't have anything to do with Laken Riley, is being deprived of due process of law. The gutting of the government continues. In defiance of this order we've had in domestic policy for 80-odd years, not to talk about breaking the foreign alliances, the betrayal of Ukraine, betraying NATO, moving our country in a direction of being pro-Russia when they are clearly our adversary, and they are egging on the demise of America, and they are just enjoying every bit of it. I wouldn't be surprised if Putin isn't throwing a party. I would be surprised if he wasn't throwing a party every day or every week celebrating what damage Donald Trump has done to our government. Our economy as well. Defying our courts, and I'll read you Judge Sinis's order in a minute, what she has ordered in discovery. It's sort of an interim order. Well, it's a pre-trial order of how Donald Trump's government keeps defying the Supreme Court and Judge Sinis's order. Now, because of this defiance, because of defying the norms of trade, we are seeing the dollar sinking like an anchor and gold soaring. We're seeing that China is spreading propaganda that America is not a safe place to invest your money. That is going to impact our economy, and we're going to be shell-shocked by it. The continued trade wars, despite talking about lowering in China, he's lowered it so that the market can go back up a little bit, so that people who he lets know that, yeah, this is what I'm doing, can buy when it's low and then the next day sell when it's high and make millions of dollars, like Marjorie Taylor Greene did. This is a matter of public knowledge, no litigation needed. Just look it up. Marjorie Taylor Greene, when she bought the in the market and when she sold it, and there was a spike there before the spike in the buying of stocks when it was low, right before Donald Trump announced that he was taking tariffs off the table for 90 days. And then now same thing with China, but then keeping a tariff on China big enough that it still disrupts the flow and the cost of materials and consumer goods coming into the United States from China, which, by the way, stocks most of Walmarts all around rural America. That's how it comes back to hurt the common man and woman living in America. So he's continuing to defy the earned benefits of Social Security, the medical backbone of Medicaid and Medicare. He's decided that not only is he going to take on China, but now he's also going to take on Harvard, alongside with, on many occasions, taking on the judiciary. Because what this does is it creates a war on Americans on all fronts. It's a war, it's a chaos that's eroding the foundations of American democracy and crumbling the gateway to democracy that law and society holds together, stands and holds up. So our country's in a compromised state. The government is going after student loan borrowers who have defaulted. Next, they'll go after those who are in income-driven plans, like myself. And then they're going to go after whoever they want in the government. Rubio is cutting the state. Doji is getting into different parts of continues to get into different parts of the government to get data. And all of that in defiance of law is happening in front of our eyes in broad daylight, public reporting happening every day. So now I'll give you a specific example of the defiance of Donald Trump by reading you portions of Judge Sinis's order and the language from it, because Donald Trump's defendants, the defendant being Donald Trump's government, is not complying with the Supreme Court's order or with Judge Sinis's court's local rules, discovery rules order that she gave after the Supreme Court ruled that Abrego Garcia needs to be returned. Here we go. Defendants and their counsel well know that the falsehood lies not in a supposed premise, but in their continued mischaracterization of the Supreme Court's order. That order made clear that this court properly required the government to facilitate Abrego Garcia's release and custody in El Salvador, and to ensure that his case is handled as it would have been had he not improperly been sent to El Salvador. Defendant's objection reflects a willful and bad faith refusal to comply with discovery obligations. Bad faith. Defendants are therefore ordered to supplement their answers. Mind you, there are also parts here where the court asks the plaintiff to narrow some of their interrogatories, which are questions that are asked to the opposing side during the discovery process. So the court did ask the plaintiffs to narrow their scope of their questions as well. So don't think that the court was just admonishing defendants. But what Donald Trump's government is doing in defiance of court and the Supreme Court, albeit not a direct order from the Supreme Court, which I have said several times is the only thing that's going to move the needle with Donald Trump, which it happened to do in the AARP case. And I continue to think that not until this case or some stage goes back again on appeal, the appellate court believes that it is appealable, issues an order, again affirming Judge Sinis's orders, and then that goes to the Supreme Court. At that time, the Supreme Court will have the chance, and I hope that it takes the chance of making their initial order in the Abrego Garcia case more unambiguous. Don't hang on facilitate, don't hang on any other words that effectuate. No, don't hang on those words. Or just give us what Donald Trump needs to do, because he is not listening to the lower courts. Defendants are therefore ordered to supplement their answers, include facts responsive to the requests, not oblique and incomplete, non-specific characterizations. Defendants invoke in name only a range of protections: attorney-client privilege, the work product, so pretty much the whole kitchen sink of privileges, the work product doctrine, the deliberative process privilege, the state secrets privilege, and the undefined governmental privilege, without providing any supporting information or analysis. And the only thing they left out was marital privilege and clergy. Marital privilege, I think they're leaving for Hegseth with the signal chat, and God knows where the clergy, I'm sure they'll bring it up at some point. But every other privilege that you can think of, they have stuffed in there. Defendants and their counsel know the proponent of a privilege must demonstrate the legal and factual basis to invoke the protections that such privilege affords. To that end, the proponents of the privilege have to produce a privilege log that specifically identifies each document or communication and type of privilege being asserted, and that defendants and counsel stubbornly refuse to provide any basis for the same. Given that, this court expressly warned defendants that their counsel to adhere strictly to their discovery obligations. You'll cite privilege, you'll follow the rules, I'll make a determination. Their boilerplate, non-particularized objections are presumptively invalid and reflect a willful refusal to comply with court's discovery order and governing rules. The court thus finds this order was not made in good faith. Twice, once directly, now saying not in good faith, in bad faith. So it's getting closer and closer to the point of contempt here during the discovery process, because they have nothing to defend or no facts to show what privilege applies or why they are not facilitating Abrego Garcia's release like the Supreme Court ordered. For weeks, defendants have sought refuge behind vague and unsubstantiated assertions of privilege, using them as a shield to obstruct discovery and evade compliance with this court's orders. Defendants have known, at least since last week, that this court requires specific legal and factual showing to support any claim of privilege. Yet they have continued to rely on boilerplate assertions. So they have essentially stonewalled the government. They have stonewalled the judiciary. They're obstructing discovery, evading compliance of the court's order. If defendants want to preserve their privilege, now we get to that point where you can see that the judge is very angry. If defendants want to preserve their privilege claims, they must support them with the required detail. Otherwise, they will lose the protections they failed to properly invoke. That's what the district court's fact finding is in this case, and it's pretty clear there. If you cannot prove what you're saying, the court will not go along with you, and the Supreme Court is not going to go on a fact-finding mission and find on your behalf. At least not a majority of them. Alito and Thomas, yeah, maybe. Accordingly, by no later than April 23rd, 6 p.m., defendants must supplement their answers and responses provided and provide the specific legal and factual basis for each asserted privilege and produce a privilege log that fully complies with the federal rules of civil procedure and this court's local rules. Then there's plaintiffs are entitled to discover all relevant probative, meaning proving evidence that proves, probative evidence that undermines the defendant's incomplete and evasive answer that Abrego Garcia is in the sovereign domestic custody of El Salvador. Indeed, custody can be joint and custodial status may be controlled by the defendants acting in concert with El Salvador. Talking about the contract in a sense. Information regarding Abrego Garcia's removal as well as placement and confinement in CCOT cut to the heart of the inquiry, namely, what steps, if any, defendants have taken or will take to facilitate Abrego Garcia's release from custody in El Salvador and to ensure that his case is handled as it would have been had he been improperly sent to El Salvador. The areas are also relevant and probative as to whether defendants have made in good faith all reasonable efforts to comply with this court's order. Defendants have failed to respond in good faith, and their refusal to do so can only be viewed as willful and intentional non-compliance. So this is defiance as constitutionally grave as defiance can get. Nothing short of a direct SCOTUS order, Donald Trump's government will keep on defying. Defendant's answer is vague, evasive, and incomplete. The interrogatory is limited to all efforts the government has taken to facilitate the return of aliens wrongfully removed from to El Salvador. The interrogatory 14 seeking complete factual basis of defendant's assertion that Abrego Garcia is a member of MS-13. Mind you, they've been saying MS-13 this whole time, and as you'll see in a minute, there's no proof of it. Defendants have previously articulated in their daily updates as to Abrego Garcia's custodial status and his potential return that DHS would eventually take Garcia into custody and either remove him to another country or terminate withholding of removal because of his purported membership in MS-13, a designated foreign terrorist organization. Defendants cannot invoke the moniker of MS-13 as responsive to the court's previous order. They object to follow-up interrogatories seeking the factual basis for the same. Defendants must supplement this answer. So with that, it gives a expedited timeline of when there have to be replies to these questions that the plaintiff has made, and you have the order. So you see this defiance, and you ask yourselves, is defiance good? It depends on the circumstance. It depends if you're thinking about it socially and societally, or if you're just thinking about it selfishly. It depends on the purpose of your defiance. Is your purpose for the greater good, or is it only for self-preservation and self-power and get greed of getting more wealth? These questions have to be asked because defiance is happening on all sides, everywhere. And we have to look at the defiance and make sure we can discern between the defiance that is good trouble, and the defiance that erodes at the foundations of democracy, law, and society. With that said, thank you so much for listening. Please like, share, and subscribe. And this is my defiance, my words. Thank you so much.